Welcome, whether you're on my page or Stara's page, to a first, maybe of several conversations that we decided to have about some of the outstanding criminal matters that we are covering. As most of you know, I am a civil lawyer and have been for 25 years. Stara is a criminal lawyer. I'm going to let her introduce herself. And we just thought it would be really nice for us to address some of these cases with both of our perspectives. We tend to kind of bounce off of each other in our content as it is. And we talk amongst ourselves about these cases. So we thought we would talk amongst ourselves in front of you. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm not actually Golden. I have been a civil lawyer for about 25 years. I do a lot of employment law, but I've also done a lot of civil litigation. And I make content mostly about civil cases. I will make content about criminal cases if I feel that I can stay in my lane. And one of the things that helps me stay in my lane is my friend Stara.
Everyone, I am attorney Stara. I am a criminal defense attorney. I have primarily practiced criminal law either as a prosecutor or a defense attorney for 21 years. My brief civil experience includes some family law, and I used to be an administrative attorney in the state of Texas. And, I found Miss Not Actually Golden while posting my own content. And I think, I agree with what she says. A lot of what we have to say kind of bounces off each other. And I think that even though we have different practice areas, bouncing off how things would be perceived in different contexts is very helpful, especially when you've got a lot of kind of complicated, both statutory and case law issues at play, which I think is a big deal in the two cases that we're about to talk about. And so, like she said, let's have an actual conversation together instead of off of each other.
This is actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the first time we've orally spoken to each other, like verbally spoken to each
other. Which is weird because it doesn't feel that way.
And not at all, because we're constantly messaging and texting back and forth. But, there's a first time for everything. I have a question I've always wanted to ask you, but I never have.
Okay.
Is your name supposed to be like a star? Like, I know you wear star jewelry. I've seen you have star things in your house. Is that the origin of your name, or is it something else?
My mom was going to name me Star with just no A. And then one of her friends had a baby and named the kid Star. This is what she's told me. And then I guess she just added the A. And while I don't actually like my name, most people do. It's a burden. Now it's just become a theme in things that I purchase. I feel entitled to things that have stars in them, even though I still have to pay for them. But yeah, I don't know.
As you should. I bet it also helps people remember your name, though, because you're not another Melissa or Michelle or whatever.
For better and for worse, yes.
I had a very good friend early on in my career whose name was her first name, her government name was Cinnamon. Oh, no. And she's like, my parents were hippies. My sister's name is Ginger. Like, these are just the names that we got. But as she got older, she was like, you know what? No one ever forgets me. Like, if I go to a networking event, people will say, oh my God, it's Cinnamon, because who's going to forget that? So you have a little bit of that with Stara.
Yeah, people think my parents were hippies. And I'm like, no, not in the, my dad was a farmer.
I was going to say the notorious Texas hippies. I don't think so.
Yeah, not so much.
Okay, so we are going to talk about two cases today. We are going to talk about Lindsay Clancy, and we are going to talk about Luigi. We have a couple of rules. If you watch either or both of us regularly, you probably know what these rules are. We just want to be upfront that we don't think that everybody's stupid. We're going to try not to be condescending. We try not to do that in our content, but we are not going to put up with rude, stupid comments. So if you are watching this video and you would like to make comments and give feedback, we would love to hear it. We would love to hear your questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But if you say, you're wrong, you guys don't know what you're talking about, and have you seen this, blah, 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 you might get deleted and or blocked. So please just beware. Like I said, we try to bounce our content off of each other. I think that hopefully we can share perspectives where you still can figure out kind of like what the main ideas are, our perceptions of things. Neither of us professes to know everything about either one of these cases. We think we have more expertise than a lot of people who are talking about these cases, but we certainly don't think we know everything. And frankly, and I haven't even asked Star if she agrees with this, but I'm just going to assume she does. There's a lot of legal content out there that is being made by men where people will just accept whatever they say. And I can't even I am not aware of a channel or a podcast or something where there is more than one woman attorney talking at a time.
No,
Are you? Okay.
not
So,
that I'm aware of.
right. So the world needs that. We need it. We're going to provide it. Okay. So let's start with Lindsay. We are recording this on the Sunday prior to what is probably going to be the last week of the case. We left the case on Friday afternoon with Dr. Mack, I believe is his name. They had kind of a little bit of a tornado happening there, and everyone just decided to call it and come back on Monday. But I think one of the things that I have been asked over the course of the case a million times that I don't know the answers to because I've never been a prosecutor that Star might know. Without knowing what happens in this particular prosecutor's office in this particular state that neither of us practice in, a lot of people ask, like, how do these cases get assigned? Did these particular prosecutors ask for this case? Did they make the charging decision? Who makes the charging decision? Can you give a little bit of background, just generally speaking, about how that kind of stuff works?
Yeah. I mean, I get the sense that this is like a smaller, because I don't think they use the term counties. I don't remember how they phrase it in Massachusetts. I don't know.
Districts? I don't know.
Yeah, the way they divide it up is a little bit different from what I can tell, but I haven't, researched this. But I do get the sense this is kind of a smaller office than like a big city. And I know that one of the prosecutors, I think it's the one with the big bows, if I recall correctly, she is the head of the homicide division. So she is extremely experienced. But anytime something like this comes through that is extremely high profile, I think people don't understand that it's actually pretty rare for like an elected prosecutor to try the case, because I know that their elected is sitting like behind them, but they don't usually actually try the cases. And so something like this, because it is such a high profile thing, you're going to hand off to the people who have been there the longest and have the most experience. And while I certainly have questions about their approach, what is apparent to me is they're not dumb. I've criticized them quite a bit because I don't understand their strategy, but like they know the rules and things. And so, I don't necessarily think that they asked for this. I think they would be probably the first people they would hand these off to. Maybe they did, but that is actually pretty rare. They're not making the decision. The elected DA is deciding these are the people that we think should handle this case.
And the elected DA is the one deciding to charge in the first place, right?
Probably here, I mean, anything like this, regular cases, the elected DA is not really involved in all the decision making. But in something like this, he would be very intimately involved since there's been eyes on this from day one. So
I'd be interested in, and I know there's been some local reporting, I haven't been following it as closely, about whether, depending on how this case turns out, what that could mean for this DA, this elected DA, because, there's a lot of people who feel like, why was this charged the way that it was? Shouldn't they have just made a deal to let the woman go to a mental hospital? And, we'll see what happens in the end. But locally speaking, I wonder what the sentiment is about this going all the way to trial, because I would imagine it's not, everybody's on the DA's side.
I mean, I would be surprised if that were the case, but of course, I don't know. But the thing that I think people are getting kind of confused about here, and I'm not here to say I'm an expert in Massachusetts law, but there needs to be a fact finder determination that she was insane. And there's a way that they can do it, and I don't totally know, where they could basically try the case by many stipulations as far as her mental state. I am not an expert on this. But realistically, there was always going to be a jury involved in this, because she can't just agree to be like not guilty by reason of insanity. The state could basically stipulate to the underlying things, I believe, but a fact finder would still have to sign off on it. And you can't waive jury on a first degree case in Massachusetts, which is surprising to me. Yeah, I did not know that. But yeah, you can't. And so, like, to me, I don't know. It's hard to like talk about this in a way I would think about it, because I don't see this case as obvious as I feel like the prosecutors do.
Yeah.
This might be a good issue before a judge, but they can't even do that. So I don't know.
So in terms of like plea bargaining, let's just say that the prosecutors were like, I don't want to try this case. But we don't necessarily want to put her in prison. It sounds like Massachusetts law might prohibit them from making the deal that they would want to make. And if they can't do a bench trial, then we were kind of always going to end up here.
That is my understanding of it based on the research I did. If somebody is a Massachusetts lawyer and wants to come correct me, you will not hurt my feelings. But that is, I mean, you can't waive jury. So somebody was always going to have to decide if she was insane. And I don't think that you can just agree to that, like in the way that you can agree to other plea bargains. So, you know, I mean, it was always going to be this way, or always going to play out in this forum. Whether or not it was always going to be this way is a very
that's another question. Well, and that, yeah. I think that's the thing that people are wrangling with, is they see these prosecutors who, yes, like you said, they have a lot of experience. One of them heads up the homicide. They clearly know technically, like we can tell by watching them, they technically know how to put evidence in and, you know, do all the things they're supposed to do. But because this case has so many, for lack of a better word, feelings in it, they seem to have this kind of robotic, rote approach to a case that, you know, you've got this sad looking woman in a wheelchair on the other side of the courtroom. And it just creates such an incredible contrast. Like, you know, there are like you, I have criticized many of the things that they have done. Some of them are style though, don't you think? I mean, some of it is not necessarily qualifications. It's just their style.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that to me is like their biggest problem. It just doesn't appear like they have ever even considered the possibility that someone would view Lindsay in any way sympathetic. And everything that they do seems to have that in mind. And I think that it's kind of crazy to not even consider that. You know, their approach is always just very, I mean, one of the biggest criticisms I have is they don't contextualize their evidence at all. It's like, we have data, we put data, jury, totally. Look at data. And there's a way to tell the story. And quite frankly, there might be a case in here where I would agree with the position that they're taking. The problem is the way they are attempting to present it is so off-putting to me and offensive in many ways, quite frankly, that it's hard to parse out what the good case is. Like, we're not seeing their best case because they're operating from this place of disdain for this woman that makes me personally call into question any one thing that they're trying to do. You know, like, it's just, their through line is she's evil. And I think there's a much better way to try the case, which is to acknowledge her mental health problems, acknowledge all of her struggles, and just say mental illness alone is not a defense. Instead, it's like hard to even articulate what they're doing. But the thing you should be approaching this from is mental illness is not a defense on its own. You have to get to the language that's in the jury instruction. And we're not telling you she's not mentally ill. We're telling you she doesn't meet this. And that is not what they're doing.
No. And there's a gap there, like to your point about, you know, I was asking you a couple days ago, when they get to closing and they have to argue premeditation, how long, like I currently, after watching this trial for 3 weeks, don't know what the prosecution's argument is about when the premeditation began. Is it when she ordered the food? Is it 3 months before when she started going to, I honestly don't know what their case is. And that's troublesome because if I don't know, the jury doesn't know either.
Well, that's the thing. It's like the way they present all of the like historical psychological information that we do have about her with this like doctor shopping theme and like lying to providers and all that. There's a way to frame that makes sense to me. Instead, it does almost seem like they're trying to articulate that she has been planning this via her doctors for a long
Right.
time. And I'm sorry, you will never convince me that that's what happened here. Never. And they
No.
don't need to do that. Like what they really need to be saying is, look, she was struggling. We're not denying it. She had all these kind of issues, whatever else. And it got to the point where she felt like she was never going to get better. And so when she saw an opportunity, she took it.
Yeah.
That's how much clearer is that and convincing is that than what you have seen. Instead, it's just like she's been evil. She's always evil, evil from day one. Like I was thinking about this earlier as far as like her suicidal ideation,
Yeah.
because they have tried to like minimize that, act like it's not real. And I'm like, no, I actually think it would be to their benefit to embrace that and say, look, she's been thinking about doing this for a very long time. That does not mean she's insane. What it means is she finally got to the point where she just felt like there was nothing else she could do. And so
Right.
she did this. That's so much clearer and easier to like get on board with, quite frankly. And instead, what we see is this just insane idea that she's been planning this for months. And I just don't think anybody's going to buy that. And the jury doesn't have to agree with them, but that's the case they're presenting. And if the
Exactly.
jury doesn't like your theme, they're going to be arguing with you in their head the whole time.
Exactly. Like that. If they, there's some piece of evidence, I can't remember what it was, if it was a doctor's note or something, where she said, I just got to the point where I felt like, well, no one's ever going to be able to help me because I took the drugs and I talked to the doctors and I did the inpatient. And I guess I'm just hopeless. Like you said, there's an argument in there for me of like,
That's
she
about it.
decided, right. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to go, and I can't stand the thought of my kids being here without me. So I'm just going to do it all. But that, like you said, that's not the conversation that they're having. I wonder if it is a small community, like you said, and I'm sure there's, we forget that they're living outside the courtroom too. Like the prosecutors presumably live in this area, or at least go, work in this area. I'm sure that when this all happened, there was so much horror and sentiment about, oh my God, these 3 little children have died. And so much sentiment about, we have to get justice for these children. We have to get justice for these children. Because I feel like the prosecutors have this sense of righteous indignation of like, we are here for the kids, right? Which is probably reflective of the people who live in that area, right? Because up until recently, they didn't know that Lindsay may have had all these mental issues. They just know that this woman lost her shit and killed her kids, and somebody needs to pay for that. But like you said, it never occurred to them that maybe some people could hold that idea and also sympathy for Lindsay at the same time. Like, you can be really sad and horrified that these children died in the most horrific way by the person who was supposed to love them the most, and also feel like the person who did it was in a state that she never should have been in a place that nobody recognized. Right? Like, they just don't seem to think that we can do both. And I think that's what everybody's doing.
No, it is. I mean, you see a lot of sentiment on TikTok of like people that like hate her, right? Like that is a very real thing.
Yes,
It is incredibly dangerous to assume that the 18 people that are sitting in that jury box are already there. And that's where they're operating from. Like I was talking about this with my husband, who's a prosecutor. And, one of the things that we both know from living in a criminal courthouse is people will identify with people far less sympathetic than Lindsay Clancy. They will see something in themselves. And the idea that like nobody on that jury might have somebody in their family that they can find a way to relate to her, even if it's not them personally, that might be true, but it might not.
It might not. And, I know that the jury it's like 12 women and 6 men, I think. So we'll have to see what the ultimate makeup is.
Yeah, we don't know who's going to deliberate.
We don't know what the ultimates are, right? But like, and I'm sure the jury's selection, I'm sure they asked, all kinds of questions about this. But one of the things that keeps coming up in my mind when they're talking about the SSRIs, whether it's the prosecution or the defense, 25% of the American population is on an SSRI, including me. Right. So, like, I think that the prosecution is addressing them as if they are either SSRIs themselves are bad, or that you can't really be that screwed up by an SSRI. And there are a lot of
Yeah,
people who have terrible reactions to them. And I think to your point,
me.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I tried to take one for a while, and I got so sick I couldn't get out of bed.
really. My
Hmm.
mom started taking Prozac and she was like that. She's like, I can't function. So the chances that one of the people who goes in to deliberate, either themselves or someone they know or somebody who's a friend of a friend's daughter, has been through something like that seems pretty high,
Yeah,
right? Like
I
they're
mean,
brilliant.
it seems pretty high. I mean, of course, the counter to that would be, well, there could be some people that are like just not believing in mental health issues in the way that it seems the prosecutors are. But again, you cannot assume that all of those people are like that. They just seem to have, like, over the course of time that they have prepared this case, decided that they hated her and forgot that somebody might not.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they think, and maybe this is part of being, you tell me, maybe this is part of being a career prosecutor, is I feel like all they see is mom kills kids, everyone hates that.
Hmm.
Right? And
Yeah.
honestly, in their defense, I'm gonna give them a little bit of defense. For most of time, that has been the truth, right? Like, that's the
And
other
it's not
thing that I
like
think
a crazy idea, it's
it
not like an
happens.
insane thing to think, because there are people that kill their children that are just evil. Those
There
people
are.
exist. Um, what was the last thing you said? Because being a
Um,
career prosecutor, whatever.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, yes, but like, and I will say that my position on this is, it's hard to take my own bias out of this from the perspective of, like, I know a lot more about, like, dealing with people who commit crimes in similar mental states because I've had clients in that situation. And so it's hard for me to separate that. I mean, I had a murder case a couple years back where, like, my client, her criminal history was heinous. She killed her boyfriend. It was a
Mm,
self-defense kind of situation. And, like, it wasn't a question that she did it. And initially, my kind of impression of her was like, yikes, this long criminal history ending in killing her boyfriend. There was, like, a legitimate self-defense claim there, but I was like, that's going to be tough because you have all this history. And then I got a hold of her. I legitimately, it was like 10,000 pages of CPS records. And I was like,
oh,
I get it now. And I became incredibly sympathetic to her. And so I took this to the prosecutors. I was like, look, I understand where you're coming from right now. I'm just going to tell you, here's what I see in her records that's going to make her appear differently than I think you think it is. Because a lot of this stuff was going to come into play because if it was a self-defense argument. And they were like, and these are two people that I don't have an issue with. They were very not responsive to that. And it took me yeah, and it was kind of a surprise because that's not, like, actually my experience where I practice. Like, you can have these conversations with prosecutors, and a lot of them do see the forest for the trees. They were very dismissive of it. And it took me up until, like, literally 3 days before the trial was going to start. And they finally agreed to reduce her charge and cut her sentence in half. Because, like, she was, realistically, she probably wasn't going to walk out of there. But um, yeah, like, I was very surprised by that. And, you know, all of my positions are this person always comes to mind for me because she was the perfect example of somebody who looks really horrible on paper. And then you get to looking and you're like, oh, there's so much more going on here that I
yeah.
can't possibly relate to.
Well, and I wonder, I'm sure there's studies and work out there about how juries are changing now that the mental health stigma, especially, but even just like regular folks understanding trauma. Like I'm more empathetic than I ever was before because like you said, I'm like, what happened to this? Some people are just pieces of shit. But a lot of people, it's like, oh, what have they been through? That doesn't necessarily excuse their crime. But I think that seems like another thing these prosecutors are missing is that no matter what questions you ask them in voir dire, they might, be on the same internet we're all on and be like, people do, I feel for people. People are coming from somewhere, especially women.
Well, and people don't reveal all of that information, no matter how perfectly you ask your question in voir dire, like there's just no way to assume that you know all of that. And yeah, like jurors are changing and are more open to that than I think that they ever have been. And they seem to be operating like they were trying this case in like 1987. I follow a prosecutor on TikTok who has different takes than me, but like she's not unreasonable. And so I've had interactions with her. And, one of the things I said yesterday when I was talking to her was they are trying this case as though Lindsay Clancy is Tanner Horner. The guy that was the FedEx truck.
Yeah.
Yes. They're trying this case as though Lindsay is that. Yeah. And I'm like, you can't be doing that. You just can't. Even if you think she is the worst person that ever lived and you don't feel sorry for her in the least, it's so hard for me to fathom that nobody approached them and said, hey, we got to consider how different people might start at this. You cannot take out whatever happened to that juror in their life before they got here.
Right. Yeah. I think too, like, I don't know about you, but I think a lot about what this case would look like if Lindsay had a different lawyer. Like if Reddington's style is no one's going to protect her, so I'm going to do it. Right. He has this very like daddy, I'm on it kind of approach, which I think
and
is
it's not an act. It is very legitimate. Yeah.
It's who he is. And I respect him for that. And I respect that he has built his career doing this kind of thing. But, because he's willing to be super aggressive. I mean, there are things, and you and I both know as women lawyers, there are things that he can get away with in that courtroom that we could never get away with.
Yeah.
We couldn't say, I don't care what it says. I'm going to whatever. Like, right. That would turn people off.
No.
But the way he barrels away at stuff makes it, this is where I think, to your point, the prosecutors are like, what are we even supposed to do here? Because he is, every single thing he does in the courtroom, even when his mouth isn't open, is in this very like, I've got her back, how dare you kind of posture. And people are watching it on TV and they're reading it for what it is. And whatever his, empathy and protection of Lindsay is like coming through to all of us. It's got to be coming through in that room. It has to be.
I mean, I love how he is always like looking at the prosecutors when they get up to me, like what the fuck are you going to say? I mean, because that's really what he thinks. Like, you can be a good defense attorney by being an actor, but like, I don't think any of this is fake. And, like, that's to me why I think that Sue Clancy could end up being really, really important, because it's abundantly clear through her testimony that she has forgiven Lindsay. And to me, the only logical conclusion from that is that she believes that this was the result of a mental health, whatever. And I think I said this in a video this weekend, but it's like the jury is not likely to be able to sit there and parse out, like, the medication stuff is interesting to me because I'm a person who lives on Earth. Mm-hmm. They're not going to remember all of that. Like, they're not. It's just not possible. So they're going to remember, how did I feel throughout this presentation? How did I feel when I saw Patrick's mother get up there and testify as a witness for the defense, who it was apparent that she was very sympathetic and cared about Lindsay. She could have gotten up there and said, like, this chick was horrible from day one and, whatever. Like, that's what the prosecutors were trying to do by being like, did you know in her text she says y'all aren't close or whatever?
Dude, if my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, ever saw the things I said about her in text messages, she would call the police. I mean, give me a fucking break. And again, the it's not even insensitivity. It's like, their lack of communication skills about how they bring these issues up. It's
Mhm.
just so dry. And it's like if you're going for this narrative of you guys are all why is everybody protecting her when she did this horrible thing? You can do that, but you're going to have human emotion in your voice when you do it. And it just every time one of them talks, I feel like I'm listening to a typewriter. It's just so like if you're mad, be mad. If you're pissed
Except
at
when
her,
they get snarky. That's the emotion they possess is snark.
right. Which comes off like resentment to me of like, what do you mean this isn't the way? Like, guys, you got to deal with the facts that you've got. Good Lord.
Yeah. Like I said, there might be a good case in there. They are not trying it, which isn't me saying they might not win. Like that's the thing.
Sure, they
I
might.
have done a lot of I'm waiting for the floodgates of people if she is convicted. I told you. Well, I've told you the whole time that they very much could win, but it will be in spite of a lot of their choices.
Right. This is that jury instruction that you've talked about a couple of times in Massachusetts, where we've got this lack of criminal responsibility. And I know we've both tried to clarify like 1 bajillion times for people about what the options are for the jury. And the options are guilty, not guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity or lack of criminal responsibility here, right? But the thing that I think is going to come up so much in closing is this burden issue. Because it looks like under the Massachusetts law, it's actually when there's a not guilty by reason of insanity, the burden is on the Commonwealth to prove that they weren't suffering from a mental disease or defect. Can you talk about how that usually looks and why this is different?
Yeah. So most states, it's the burden of the defendant to prove that, in fact, the reason that this happened is because of the, however they want to word it, mental disease or defect, which is like the McNaughton rule. And the fact that you have to disprove it, that is a very big and unique thing. And it's a big advantage to the defense because all they really have to do is raise a reasonable doubt that all of these things were at play. That's all they have to do. I mean, both sides have like a tough case here, right? Like Reddington has bad facts, the state, Commonwealth, whatever, has really bad facts. Like this is a terrible situation. And where that comes out in the wash is kind of hard to say, but that's why I think that they are overplaying every single thing that they have because they have to turn everything. I don't think that they need to do this, but in their minds, they have to turn everything into evidence that none of this was at play. And I don't think that's necessary, but I do think that's why they're pushing every tiny little thing so hard because they know they have that burden. But I think that that burden would be better served by embracing a lot of things that they're just not.
Yeah. I mean, if you were in, well, certainly the state I live in, maybe the state you live in, this would not be the case. Like you would,
No, I think they might be the only state with it like this.
well,
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
I guess this is the state to have a psychotic break. Because I mean, you can even see there, like the jury's going to take that back. I'm sure this is going to be on a blow up. There is no burden on the defendant to prove that they lacked criminal responsibility. I mean, they don't have to prove anything.
They just
And
have to raise it.
they just have to raise it. And, if you get, the burden, the tie goes to the defense in criminal cases, right? If you're not sure, that's a no. This part at the bottom, like this is the part that I get it, but it's confused me. And so I imagine it's confused others. The mental disease or defect that caused the lack of criminal responsibility doesn't have to be a medical diagnosis. But it seems like there's really no way to introduce it other than to tie it to a medical diagnosis, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that that's why Reddington is so focused on this idea of postpartum psychosis. I think too much, perhaps, because the way his case has kind of set this up is that you either need to believe that she was in psychosis or none of this applies, and I don't think you need to do that, right? Because I think the reason that, like, one of the things Dr. Resnick said, which I thought was really the most important thing that he said, although I think a lot of people missed it, was that this isn't postpartum psychosis in like the way that medical people understand it. What it is psychosis that occurred during the postpartum period as a result of all the things leading up to it. And so I think that Reddington has focused so much on it being postpartum psychosis a bit to his detriment, because it really does seem like all the questions I get about this are, well, they have to prove she was in psychosis. And I'm like, no, that's actually not what it is. Psychosis would explain why she doesn't understand these things.
Right. So like postpartum psychosis as a diagnosis versus psychosis that happens within the postpartum period.
Yes.
Okay.
Like in the video I posted, Friday, or I think it was Friday, I used the clip of Resnick saying it. And to me, that was the single most important thing that Resnick said. And Reddington was at a disadvantage here because he's not in the courtroom. And I know he was sick and recovering. And so the sound is kind of wonky and whatever else. But that was so important. And I fear it got lost.
Yeah. Maybe Reddington will bring it up in closing.
Well, my concern about it is that he seems really focused on it being postpartum psychosis. And that's why he's having this huge argument with Dr. Mack, who doesn't understand postpartum, and I don't even think is the right expert for the Commonwealth here.
No.
But some of this tit for tat about the DSM and stuff to me is like, things are getting lost in it, because the DSM says whatever the hell it says. Maybe you think it's wrong, and that's a perfectly valid point to make. But that's why I think what Resnick said is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I were talking before this about that video, a TikTok video done by, I believe the user is Let Them Eat Cake. And she's a nurse.
Just like NP.
Yes. And she explained it in a way that I haven't heard it explained in the courtroom yet, which I thought was incredibly clear, that like when she first took the SSRI and her reaction was she couldn't sleep for 48 hours and she wasn't tired. If people knew what they were looking for, that is like huge flashing red lights that it's a bipolar diagnosis. But unfortunately, and Gelada saw that, but unfortunately, Tufts was treating the depression and the sleep issues. And so the bipolar part kind of slipped by. And then if you keep giving somebody with bipolar disorder SSRIs, they get like a million times worse. That was the clearest that I had seen it put together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and she also talks about like how hormones can impact your reactivity to certain things. But, I think that like most of those providers where she was were actually not as bad as everybody thinks that they were. They just weren't working in concert with each other. And to the extent any one of them other than Tufts picked up on these things, there was just not a conversation, it felt like. And I understand that people are saying, well, Lindsay rejected this bipolar thing and so did Patrick and whatever else. My problem is with what we know about how all this was conveyed to her. I understand why they were not feeling heard, because these are all in the context of 25-minute Zoom meetings or whatever. And it's like, if I were going to try and tell somebody you're bipolar, or I think you're bipolar, right, I'm just not going to assume that a 17-minute Zoom meeting or a MyChart message is the way to convey that message, especially if you think someone is mentally ill. Right? Like, if I think somebody has bipolar, me telling them you have bipolar, I can understand why a bipolar person might be. No one wants to be bipolar.
Of course.
Because that seems like a permanent problem. Whereas Lindsay, I think, very much wanted this to be a postpartum problem. And she was probably wrong about that, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But is that Lindsay's failing? Like, that's the thing. It's like everybody wants to point blame at any one thing, and I don't think there is. I think there's just this perfect storm of things that were missed that got us where we are.
Yeah. And that is the one thing that I am willing to place blame on Patrick for, if it's accurate, that Nurse Gelada testified that when she said, I think you might have bipolar disorder, that that was one of the calls that or meetings that Patrick was in. And Nurse Gelada claimed that he said, my wife is not bipolar. Right. So not only was Lindsay reluctant because again, like you said, nobody wants to be bipolar. That even though lots of people are and live perfectly full lives, that has a huge stigma attached to it. And if she was feeling like, okay, my husband doesn't want me to be this, and I don't want to be this, and I don't want to be this sick person. I'm the person who can do everything. I'm not a sick person. I take care of sick people. It's not hard to see. Plus, throw on all the expectations society has on women. It's not hard to see how she would be like, okay, no, right? She and Patrick decide like, no, we're going to go find another way. Unfortunately for them, that other way made it worse.
Yeah, well, and I think if somebody tried to tell me I was bipolar right now because I was having some kind of like serious crisis, I'd be like, well, wouldn't this have been apparent a long time ago? And it's like, that's not how that works, but that's how a lot of people think it works.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the civil cases. I probably should have looked. Is this Patrick? This is Lindsay's. Okay, so Lindsay is the one where she sues everybody and their sister. Patrick only sues Tufts and Gelada. But just like this is the way it's described in the civil case, which I presume is not dissimilar from whatever narrative Reddington is going for. So if you look at this, now this is medical malpractice wording, right? Psychotropic med paradoxically exacerbated underlying psychiatric vulnerability, precipitating a state of manic psychosis. So in the civil case, because in civil court, you have to prove causation, right? So in any civil claim, as I always say, you have to prove that there was some legal duty, that legal duty was breached, and that breach caused some sort of damage. Like those are the elements of negligence, but it's also basically the element of every civil claim. And the hardest part of a lot of civil claims is proving that the bad stuff that happened actually caused the damage. So in this civil case, they have to prove not only that all these things were against the standard of care of doctors, but that it caused the outcome. And so you can see here where it says they had all these problems with medications and it precipitated a state of manic psychosis because they have to prove that all this shit that was done caused the psychosis. Otherwise, the civil claim doesn't work. But you don't have to do that in the criminal case, right?
No. That's why I keep saying I feel like the prosecutors are defending the civil case and not the criminal case, right? Because here's the thing that gets lost in this too, is that Lindsay could have the most perfect medical care ever, the best providers, everything done exactly the way it should have been. And she could still get to a point where she lacked criminal responsibility. And so much of the time has been spent defending the doctors from the Commonwealth to me, that is misguided. Like they're really defending the treatment plan and whatever else. And I'm like, okay, but like the only way that has utility to the prosecutors is that you have to like, this is why I think they are acting like their motive started 3 months ago or whatever, because it's like, no, she's actively denying all of their stuff as this long plan, like, which is stupid. I'm sorry. That's so stupid. But that's how they're trying their case.
But it's like if she was going to do that, it could have been done much better, right? Like also Lindsay is not a dumb person, right? Like this is an educated woman. It just, like you said, that I think the hardest thing they have other than motive, which I know is not technically an element.
They need it here, even though it's not, they need one.
They need it.
And I think that's guiding a lot of their bad decisions.
That they don't have one?
That they don't have one that makes sense other than she's evil. So they have to frame everything in she's evil.
You know, I was thinking about it the other day and like sort of thinking about the story of Lindsay kind of thing. And honestly, if you were to put in a lab somebody who it would have a hard time believing you'd have a hard time believing they were evil. You'd pretty much come up with Lindsay Clancy, right? Like she comes from a working class family. She works her way through college. She becomes a nurse because she wants to help people. She helps other women become mothers. She's emotionally affected by the people that she works with. She wants to have a bunch of kids because she loves kids and wants to raise a family. Like it would be easier, I think, for a jury to decide that I was evil enough to commit a mental because I'm a bitch, you know? But like, but with
Same
her,
thing.
right? Like with her, you can't even find anybody who will say like sometimes she copped an attitude.
Well, and I do think that I understand in that context why part of their kind of theme and opening was she found out that the life she thought she wanted wasn't the one that she wanted. Do I necessarily believe that? No, but that is less crazy to me than some of this other stuff.
I agree. That's probably the strongest. It just became too much. What do you think about the suicide attempt? I mean, I think we all agree that the prosecution is overplaying their hand on like, did she go out head first or feet first? What fucking difference does it make the woman is paralyzed? But how much do you think that's important to their case? Or do you think they should just, assume that maybe she was trying to commit suicide because she felt guilty, which means she was conscious?
I think they should just embrace all of her suicidality and just say she was going to take out the kids and then she was going to take out herself. And when it came time to do it, she had to try all these different ways because she couldn't follow through with all of them. But this was all a part of her plan. I think instead it's like they're trying to act like I still don't even understand what they're doing. Really, I've come up with theories, but none of them really make sense to me. I think you just embrace it as a genuine attempt because trying to dispute that, I don't think you're going to convince 12 people that it wasn't a genuine attempt, which isn't, whatever the element. But it's like when your theory is based on things that juries are unlikely to agree with, they start arguing with your theory and not the facts.
Right. And like, let's just assume for the sake of argument that it was all fake. What was the plan? She was going to jump out the window. I'm sure she didn't intend to paralyze herself because who would? Um, and that people were going to find her and feel sorry for her and nobody was going to charge her with murder. Like, what was the fucking thing?
That's the thing. It's like you have to think that she did all this with this defense in mind, which, by the way, only lands her in a psychiatric facility forever.
Right. It doesn't, the plan that they say was the plan does not make sense as a plan. And I know
No.
a lot of people have said, and this makes sense, like there have been other, like I think it was Susan Smith, people who try to blame, they kill their kids and then they try to say, oh, there was an intruder or oh,
They
was
blame
whatever.
somebody else. They don't blame
Right.
them. They don't,
Evil,
like
yes, that's evil, right? It wasn't me. It was, there was a guy in a black mask. Okay, now I feel like I might be dealing with a sociopath, but that's not what happened here at all.
No, I mean, I don't understand that. And I think that this is a bigger problem for them than they realize. I cannot wait to hear how they argue this. Like I genuinely cannot wait to hear how they try and put all of this together in some kind of cohesive story. I don't understand it.
I still think that she's gonna wear some bow that is reminiscent of some bow. She's gonna put up a picture of the kids and Cora's gonna have a bow in her hair, and whatever this woman has in her hair is gonna like correlate to that bow. I feel like that's what I would do if I was the lamest person on earth, and that's what she's gonna do.
Well, the problem for them is you need people to like you for that to work. I'm sorry. I would be hard pressed to believe that this jury likes her. Like
How?
that doesn't work. That doesn't work if these people don't like you. Instead, they feel like they're being manipulated.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're trying to do.
They are. That's one of those things we could probably talk about for a million hours, which is you have to be, unfortunately, part of being in front of a jury, especially, but just being a lawyer in general, is people have to trust you and they have to like you and they have to accept what you say. as being reasonable, and they have to be like, oh, that sounds like she seems like a reasonable person, so they'll accept her reasonable argument. And again, I don't know if these women are just used to trying cases where it's all technical, it's all scientific, and so it doesn't fucking matter whether anybody believes them, but they are just at a complete loss for connecting. I can't imagine they've connected with any juror because they're not trying to. They don't even ever crack a smile or,
They think the basis of their connection with the jury is that, well, don't we all hate Lindsay?
yeah. Hate to
And
be one.
I just don't. I don't know.
I don't know. Is there anything else we want to say on Clancy? I mean, so we have the rest of Dr. Mack tomorrow, right? And then isn't there another Commonwealth expert?
There's the other person, I guess, from whatever that firm is that he went and interviewed Lindsay with together.
What was that? Part of me is like, why is that a big deal?
If you're trying to say you're independent, it's a big deal. If you're trying to say your conclusions are independent, it looks bad.
It looks bad. But they're from the same firm, right? So
yeah, but I mean, I don't know what they were each specifically supposed to talk about, like if they each have like some kind of different thing. But to me, it's inappropriate. And also, if you have two people coming to interview this woman, to me, it's like intimidating. And,
also, you're going to double team this woman, this poor woman who's like on suicide watch. Like,
yeah, well, and a lot of people have asked me this. So, like, if you raise the defense of lack of criminal responsibility, then yeah, you have to allow your client to be interviewed by the state's experts. Like, you can't stop that.
Which makes sense. That's due process.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess they're going to end on that. I guess that's going to be the end of the rebuttal case, which, okay. I mean, like you said the other day, for the prosecution to end with a Redding cross-examination where he's got like the fire coming out of his nose, that's not the best possible way to end.
It's not. I mean, because, they don't have to do these experts in rebuttal. And my initial thought was, well, but it makes sense to. But now I'm kind of like, I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, if Mac's job is to get up there and say, I think she has responsibility for the things that she did, he did that. Oop, you okay?
Yeah, I'm queen of hiccups.
Then he did that, and maybe they should just like cut their losses. I don't know that another expert is going to help them all.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the distinction is between what either of them is supposed to provide. So I don't know.
I guess we'll find out, won't we? All right, let's switch over to Luigi. But before we do, Attorney Stara, people are constantly asking you, and now people are asking me, what do you do to your face to make it look like that? Did you get around to doing some stuff or getting ready to like get a video up or whatever on your skincare?
Yes. So I have the beginnings of it. I need to finish it today. I was going to do it yesterday, but I just did not feel good. But yes, I will be posting that probably today. Which this is Sunday, so I don't know what day that we're going to post this. But I mean, first of all, and I think you've talked about this too, because people are always asking you. I have like good genetics in this regard. Okay, my mom is 70 and still doesn't really have a wrinkle. Like she's got the sag because gravity, but like she don't have any wrinkles. And my dad was a farmer who was out in the sun for 100 hours a day, didn't wear sunscreen, and don't look that bad. Like he should look like the oldest man alive, and he doesn't. Yeah. So I got lucky in that regard. And also I don't have kids and I don't drink and I don't have any expensive hobbies. So my expensive hobby is my face. So I have a lot of time to do that. I mean, I have Botox in my forehead, which people love to comment on, but I'm like, I can move it.
You can move it.
Yeah, I don't get a ton because I had that happen before and then I got like a headache and I thought I was like, I couldn't move my eyes for like 2 months. Um, and I got lucky. I don't have the crow's feet, but I mean, I retin-A, hydroquinone, which I know is controversial, but I get really bad melasma.
Uh,
Um, and then New Face, which is good for the lift.
okay.
But you have to be consistent.
I'm
And
bad at
then
that.
I go through phases where I'm really good about it and when I'm not, and I can see a difference. But the number one thing, and I'm so sorry to tell everyone this, is the Augustinus Bader witch cream. It's incredible. It's worth it. It's very expensive. It works.
Really? What's its main? Is it for brightness or tightness,
Um,
or what's its big thing?
Anti-aging. So like Dr. Bader Bader, I don't know how you say his name, was like, I think he was doing like burn research, I want to say. Kind of like Lemaire. I know that's kind of like part of their underlying thing. He was doing some kind of like not skincare research, but related to skin issues and whatever, developed this. And it's like it's anti-aging. I don't know, man. It's just it's worth the money, unfortunately, and it's very, very expensive.
I feel
But in
myself.
my post, I will be putting, I have a bunch of things that don't take from my post that I use all of these things every day. I like to kind of, experiment, but I will be putting some things. There's some products from The Ordinary that I think are actually really good. And a couple of other things like cheaper face creams that I think are good from La Roche-Posay and Aven. So there are things that I think are good that are cheaper, but unfortunately, I do think the Dr. Potter knows what's up.
I do think that you should trademark "My expensive hobby is my face," because if I were scrolling through the internet and I saw a woman say, "My expensive hobby is my face," I would be like, "What is she doing to her face?" So, become a beauty influencer, Sarah.
I know. I have so many things I want to do. None of them get done. I'm
I
still
know.
working on becoming a drumming expert, from my drum set.
Oh, I forgot about the drum set. I
Yeah, I
think,
kind of did too because I've been so busy. Bob's getting offended.
well, then Bob can learn to do. Did he buy it for you, right?
Yeah, it was my birthday present. I had said I wanted to take drum lessons, and Bob went and bought a drum set. And I'm like, well, way to call my bluff on that. I
I
mean, I
didn't.
actually really want to do it. It's just, I didn't think I was going to get all into this trial, and now I am. So,
What does one do? Do you like YouTube videos about how to play drums, or like what do you do?
no, I mean, you can do lessons. So I'm going to do that. I want to do this, and I feel like it will be like meditative for me, but also it's just a thing I have to do.
Well, now that you own it, you don't have a choice because otherwise that would
I mean,
be.
it's taken up a large chunk of my living.
Okay, so let's move on to Luigi. And this is one of those where, it's so typical in online discourse. Everyone's like, oh, the trial, the trial. And it's like, as a lawyer, like, it may go to trial, it may not. But what happened here, I think, is interesting and a little bit confusing. So we're going to stick our brains together and see if we can explain what is happening here. This is a chart that I made just because I'm a chart girl. I need to visualize things. It's just how my brain
You should
works.
let the Commonwealth know about charts. I don't think they do.
Please, God, let there be a timeline in the
Yeah.
closing, but I don't know that there's going to be. Okay, so for everybody who's either like, if you're loosely following it, you might need a reminder. I did. So there's actually 3 cases. There's a case in Pennsylvania too, because remember that they found him in Pennsylvania, but that one's not. That's just like fake IDs and whatever. These are the 2 murder cases. So there's the federal case, and then there's the New York state case. And he was charged in each of those jurisdictions. The charges are different in terms of what they're called because they're different jurisdictions. But as Stara was reminding me, and I think it's good for everybody to know, you can't charge somebody with a federal crime unless there's some interstate activity, right? Because federal courts have jurisdiction
Well,
over interstate commerce.
yeah, some kind of connection to interstate commerce. Like your crime could all occur within the same state and still have that federal nexus, but you very rarely see that happen in a murder case unless there's, transport.
Right. So that's what the feds used to charge Luigi is it was the stalking, right? It was he came from another state. He figured out where Brian Thompson was going to be. He, knew they were going to have this, whatever it was, shareholders meeting or whatever. He came from another state. He came into New York. He stalked him. Then he killed them. So this interstate stalking that resulted in the death. Then he also had the cyber stalking because he was trying to figure out like where the guy was and where the meetings were and where he was staying and all of that. So those are both federal because they involve things on the internet are almost always interstate commerce because, you can't get on the internet without talking to somebody in another state. Then they had just a straight up homicide claim. I guess it was like a firearms charge, but the firearm, it wasn't possession or anything, just murder with a firearm. Oops, I've got a typo there. And then possession of the firearm itself. So those are the 4 things he was charged with in the federal case. Am I missing anything?
I think he had a bunch, but those are the big ones. Like a bunch of like random shit. But yeah, these are the ones of interest here. Yeah.
I looked up the indictments and the informations, and this is what I saw. Okay, so then separately in the New York case, which they have jurisdiction over things that happen inside of New York State.
Oh, I was thinking of the New York State. They had a bunch of other shit.
Oh, yeah, they did. Totally did. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Murder, first degree murder, right? Just like straight up first degree homicide, premeditated homicide. And then this second degree murder with terrorism, I guess that's sort of kind of like the stalking or whatever. In the New York case, they also, what do you call it? Noticing an affirmative defense of extreme emotional disturbance, which is basically like he was crazy when he did it. Yeah.
A little more nuanced than that, but kind of.
They had that affirmative defense in the New York case. They did not have it in the federal case because I don't know that the federal law gave them that.
The federal law only has like a strict insanity defense, whereas New York state law has this extreme emotional disturbance, which is more akin to like heat of passion type things. They call it different things in different states, but it's much more like that.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so then what happened 2 weeks ago is that Luigi walked into federal court and pled guilty to 2 of the counts in the federal case. The interstate stalking resulting in the death and the cyber stalking, right? Which means that they made a deal that the others were just going to go away, correct? Because they made a deal with the feds that he would plead to those 2, and then that means the rest of them would just go away. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So
but they're still considered in his punishment.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. So what they did was he went in and pled guilty, and then they simultaneously, his defense team, the Agnifilos. I know they represented Diddy. They represented
they're big deals. Yeah.
They're a big deal. They represented that NXIVM guy, but that didn't work. But yeah, they're big deals. Like they seem to know what the hell they're doing. They filed a motion in the state court saying now that he has pled guilty in federal court to causing the death of Brian Thompson, you can't try him for the murder of Brian Thompson because of double jeopardy. So tell me from the criminal law perspective how you see double jeopardy.
Okay, first thing I do want to point out is that the murder, second degree terrorism, that was dismissed in the New York State Court.
Oh, good. Okay.
And to me, if that charge were still at play, that this would be a lot more of an interesting discussion. Like I think I did a video about this when it came out, but like the way that they wanted to allege terrorism never made sense. And they wanted to do that because it's like death penalty eligible, I believe was the reason. It was a very weak, tenuous argument, and the judge, not surprisingly, dismissed it.
Okay, got it.
Okay, but what was your question? Double jeopardy. So typically speaking, you cannot be held in jeopardy twice for the same conduct, the same crime, right? Which it's kind of a weird deal that, like, I've never fully understood the logic. Like, you can be charged for the same conduct in federal and state court, and it's not considered double jeopardy most of the time. New York has a very unique statute that is far more protective than just double jeopardy from the Fifth Amendment. I always forget that double jeopardy comes from the Fifth Amendment because I only think of it as the one we always talk about.
Right.
But there are greater Fifth Amendment protections in that regard in New York State. But like typically speaking, you're not supposed to be put in jeopardy twice for the same conduct. And I guess the way that it's looked at normally in most states is that, this is a federal offense, this is a state offense, and you violated both of them, so deal with it, right? Practically speaking, if somebody gets prosecuted by the feds or the state, most of the time, just for economy, one of them will end up going away. Like most of the time, you're not getting tried for both cases because it doesn't make sense, right? But technically, you could.
Right. So the constitutional idea being, if you are charged with a crime, you should only have to sit there and worry about your freedom once. You shouldn't have to do it multiple times for the same crime, right? Because essentially. But it looks as if there's case law that's been developed over time that if a different unit of government, all units of government have their own jurisdiction. And so if the federal government has their jurisdiction, but the state of New York has its own jurisdiction, both of them technically have the ability to charge you for the same crimes because they each have their own authority. But then in practicality, to your point, when you get down to, can you actually really try someone for both of those? That's when one of them usually yields or some kind of deal is made.
Typically speaking. And I mean, like, honestly, I've never understood why it's not really double jeopardy. There's an argument to be made, but like, I think it's stupid. Like, if you're using the exact same conduct
right
in both jurisdictions, like, convince me that it's not double jeopardy, but that's what it is.
I mean, I could see it if there was a situation where a component of the conduct was only criminal in one of the jurisdictions, right? Where it's like, yes, there's a homicide, but then also there's some piece of it that relates to, I don't know, something that's only illegal in that state. Like, okay, maybe you can say, well, we have to be able to punish people under our laws for something that this federal law doesn't cover. But in this situation, and it sounds like in a lot of situations, murder's murder. Like, causing the death of a person, should you be able to be tried in two different places for causing the same death?
I don't know the statistics on this, but I'd be very curious to see how many times somebody goes to trial for the same murder in both jurisdictions. I can't think of a time when that would have happened. I mean, I'm sure it's happened in the history of time, but do they normally do that? No, but everybody's got a hard-on of many origins for Luigi.
Right.
Some people just think he's hot, and some people want to ruin his life. And either way, they have a hard-on for him.
That's very true. Is it also like part of this, choosing which of these to plead guilty to? Obviously, that was a choice. Now, it could just be that the federal prosecutors were willing to play ball and the state weren't, right?
Mm-hmm. It could be. It's kind of hard to parse that out, to be honest with you, because I mean, part of like the objection from Luigi's attorneys is that, so basically what he's saying is that because if he tried the state case with this affirmative defense, it requires him to admit guilt, right? Like, you can't, this is kind of a Lindsay Clancy issue too. You can't really get up there and say, I didn't do it, but if I did, it's because of XYZ, right? And so if he does that in state court, then in federal court, good luck, because you've already admitted to all that, and all that stuff could be admitted in the federal court. So he's basically functionally forced to pick one to defend against, is what he is saying, right? And I don't think that's wrong. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. His extreme emotional distress defense, that was never going to go anywhere. Like, he was not, like, that would have to be a nullification situation if that's their defense, which I'm not saying couldn't happen. I don't think you're going to get 12 people to do that, but like, that's a whole other discussion. But like, the way that emotional disturbance defense works, let me just read it so people understand why I'm saying this.
Yeah.
The defendant, this is again notably different than Massachusetts, the defendant must establish by a preponderance, which is just like 51% essentially, that he acted under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance there was a reasonable explanation or excuse for that disturbance, and the reasonableness is evaluated from the viewpoint of a person in the defendant's situation as the defendant perceived the circumstances. My problem with this is to date, I have not heard that immediately prior to him murdering Brian Thompson, there was like an event that kicked this off. Like, I understand that he's got this long-standing beef with health insurance, doctors, whatever else. First of all, I don't know how you can necessarily tie that specifically to Brian Thompson, although you can make an argument, I suppose. The problem is that is such a long-standing thing that, like, when we talk about like heat of passion, extreme emotional disturbance, that's not that, right?
Right. I mean, the only thing to me that goes in his favor with that is that he didn't kill the CEO of the health insurance company that denied him coverage, right? It's almost like there's some underlying lack of logic to, I'm just going to kill a healthcare CEO, not get revenge on the guy who caught, you know what I'm saying? But like,
Yeah,
that's the only thing I've seen.
this is the thing, like he cray, okay, like Luigi cray,
Yeah.
insane, probably not. Obviously didn't seem like they were going to try and pursue that in federal court because they don't actually have the ability to do that, probably based on what they know about him. But this goes back to, are some people just kind of bad? And like, here's the thing. Anytime you criticize Luigi, it's like, oh, you love insurance. No. But like, is Luigi kind of scary, man? Like, yeah, let's be real. Luigi's kind of scary. And I do take from the way all this played out that, like, I actually think Luigi wanted to be caught because it was a part of the caper that he was putting on. Yeah. And he just didn't really think it through. Like, and the problem for him too with that extreme emotional disturbance claim was, like, it was very clear that, like, he had everything he was going to kind of do afterwards planned as well, in a lot of ways, dropping the backpack and all that stuff. And then he followed through with it.
Yeah.
That just seems like a man with a plan, I'm
always so interested by people who do things like this that are clearly planned out, that are intended to be like, they want to be famous for all the wrong reasons. I love the word caper that you just said, because that's exactly what it is.
It's kind of what it is. Yeah.
It makes me think of the Great Muppet Caper, but that's okay, because that's a great movie. And then they go and hire these incredibly good defense lawyers to try to get them out of it. And I'm not saying they don't have the right to do that, but it's also like, are you a badass or aren't you? Right? Like, you want to do all the things. Yeah. And then you want to get, like, I'm not sure I completely understand that particular mindset.
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned this to you, and like, after all this happened, I kind of went through and read Luigi Mangione's Twitter account, and I do think it gives a large amount of insight into, he was a very smug individual. Like, he's clearly extremely intelligent, but he was also quite smug. And it did give me some insight into kind of making sense of the thing that you just pointed out, in a way that, I don't know, kind of shed some light on, like, I just think this was a very arrogant individual. And while, like, free Luigi from the perspective of, like, let's all fight the insurance company, the reality is, like, this is not, I don't know what the way you do that is, but, like, was this ever going to make any change? No, I mean, I don't know.
If he had, like, kidnapped the guy and then, like, sorry, I don't know why I'm planning crimes, but if he had, like, kidnapped the guy and then, like, live streamed, like, holding a gun to this guy's head while he made him admit that they purposely deny people's insurance so they can get big, like, I'd be like, okay, that's like a cultural hero thing to do. But just popping somebody on the street, I'm just not sure that that's the most clever. Like, to your point, like, does it really change anything? No. Is it for his own glory? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I just get the sense that he was pretty arrogant. And, I don't know what all they have on, like, how exactly he planned this, but that's part of the problem, is extreme emotional disturbance isn't about a person who sat there and planned it for months and months and months,
Right. It's like, I was having a fight with my spouse and I just lost my shit and stabbed him in the neck.
Yeah.
Is it still the case, like, I know this is a gigantic generalization, but is it still the case that if you're gonna choose what kind of prison to go to, that federal is better than state in terms of just, like,
Yeah.
treatment conditions?
Yeah. And I mean, I literally just this past week had that come up where my client was pleased that the feds pursued his case first because he also had a state case, that there were differences in the conduct there. And he was pleased to know he was going to the feds first.
So that could also be a reason why you plead to the federal case instead of the state is, "Okay, at least I'll go to federal prison," right?
Yeah. And I do think he's probably about to get popped in the federal court um,
Yeah.
because of what the conduct was. I don't know the guidelines on that, but
I don't and
probably,
that's the other thing, like, what are the guidelines and blah, blah, blah. I don't
yeah, probably a lot would be my guess. So,
He's been in federal custody, right? So that he knows what that's like. I think he's gotten pretty good treatment by the other inmates in federal custody, it appears. So
oh,
maybe he
well, I mean, look, as much as I'm like, this isn't like a criminally defensible situation, it's like I get the folk hero status of him,
sure.
it's
No, we all
complicated.
it is. I just wanted to take a look. This is his allocution, and I just was interested in the exact words that he used here. Um, because he goes it's short, but, he talks about sort of why he did it and the back pain and all that, and then he really goes into, to your point, how planned this whole thing was,
Yeah.
which,
That's why
I
that
mean,
defense was not going to work in state court.
did he need to do that, or was that just for us?
I'm sure they said he needed to do that. Like they must have made it a part of like the why part. They must have negotiated that somehow.
I guess. Because, I mean, he really goes into detail about, like, I learned about the conference and, I think they're full of shit, and then I went from outside of New York. Okay, there's the interstate commerce part. I don't know that I knew this. I emailed United Healthcare posing as an investor to get information
Yeah,
about the conference. I don't think I knew that. I didn't
I
realize he was that planny about it.
yeah. I mean, look, he didn't stumble upon this guy knowing who he was and do this.
No. But I don't know that I like, figuring out there's an investor conference and figuring out that it's in New York, like, I could see somebody being able to do that without actually directly contacting
Yeah,
United
I
Health
mean,
leadership.
public companies post all that or a lot of that stuff. I don't know how the details, but
Yeah. So is it fair to say that this allocution essentially makes him guilty? I think this is the argument they're making. By doing this, now he is essentially guilty in the state case because what he's been charged with in the state case is exactly this.
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So
I guess you could still defend the, emotional disturbance claim even with this, because this is all like known information. Like it doesn't prevent you from attempting that defense, but it's also, again, like to me, that defense was never really going to work.
right. So what's the argument against the double jeopardy then? Like, what's the argument for the state of New York to make?
So to me, the biggest difference here is that the federal charge that he pled to was, can you put them back up there? Just so
The chart.
yeah.
Yeah. Hold please. There you go.
Okay, so the stalking that led to the death is different than walking up to somebody and shooting them on the street, which is literally all they have to prove in this New York State indictment. And
Okay.
so when you're there's like this Manafort case, which is the New York case law that Mangione is kind of arguing here.
Is it Paul Manafort?
I think so. Yeah.
I remember that fucking guy. Oh my God. All right, go ahead.
And I don't remember what the hell that guy was charged with. But the distinction that New York State is going to argue is that the interstate stalking adds an element, essentially, right? Like it because let me get the wording of the Manafort case because I have this. Hang on. So the Manafort argument is not simply like same facts equals double jeopardy, right? It's the same transaction, same victim, same harm, right? Like somebody died. And that the statutes are, this is what the defense is arguing. The statutes are not just designed to prevent sufficiently different harms. The counter to that is, okay, but interstate stalking is different than shooting somebody in the back of the head. Like that's the crux of the argument.
Okay.
So like that's the crux, you know, at the end of the result of both of these is the same, but the conduct that they're making a big essential element in the federal case is the stalking, in the state case is just you shot the guy. Like that's why I say the terrorism thing, if that indictment was still pending, this would be a much more interesting conversation to me.
That makes sense because then there's this additional conduct. I mean,
the terrorism was about the stalking. I can't remember exactly how it was worded.
Right. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So this is the double jeopardy motion, and like I don't understand how they do with the affidavit at first, and then it turns into a memorandum of law. Whatever. But you and I have both read it, and a lot of it is clearly not really for the court. It's for the public because it's all about like the different cops and how the New York state cops and the federal cops, and they were working together. I mean, the crux of the argument seemed to be, to me, and tell me if I'm getting it right, is that because the state police and the FBI investigated this together, handled it together from when Luigi was found in Pennsylvania, even though they technically are both their own jurisdictions and they technically have the right to bring their own charges, because they worked together to investigate, and then that was the result of those charges, that essentially was really all done by all of them together. I know that's not exactly right, but isn't that kind of what they're arguing?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the crux of what they're saying, as far as I understand it, and I'll just tell you, I had trouble reading this motion because it's so full of like flowery fan service that it was kind of frustrating to me. But yeah, like the undercurrent of everything from beginning to now from Luigi's attorneys is that there is this like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like conspiracy together against him. And I'm like, okay. You know, like
yeah, like all this stuff right here. I'm trying to find the right language, but all this stuff about the trial dates, like there's a conspiracy about the trial dates because they wanted to make sure that like everyone has that much control over trial dates.
Well, also here's the thing. Okay. And what does that change about the essential thing that you're trying to decide under Manafort? Nothing.
Nothing.
I mean kudos to them for trying. Like hell, they might win, you know, but
I mean, if you think about it, like from a big picture perspective, at least for me as a non-criminal defense lawyer, this guy does this. Everybody knows he did it. It's on camera. Like they've got him dead to rights that they know he did it and they know why he did it. They were able to get the death penalty off the table. They were able to get some of the evidence thrown out, right? They were able to get him to plead in the forum that he wanted to plead in. And now they might be able to get rid of one of the other prosecutions.
Oh, yeah.
Not bad work.
No, I mean, don't take my, like, I'm not really buying it to be that this is bad work, because it's not. Like, it's not. They are very good at what they do. My issue with the motion was it was kind of flowery. And like, yeah, and like that's an argument to make in person in writing. It's definitely to speak to the people who support Luigi, which I mean, go off, but no, like they're doing amazing work for this dude, you know? And I don't know, like I said, I don't know what the federal guidelines are, but like he's going to end up doing it. Let's say he ends up having to plead at the state case and he gets a bunch of time, which I think, I don't think it's auto life in New York State. He's going to spend the bulk of it in the feds, which is really what he probably wants at this point.
Yeah.
And so that's probably why he pled in federal court realistically, because like I said, I don't think they actually thought this extreme emotional disturbance was going to win this case for them unless there was a nullification situation. And then they were always going to have to deal with the feds. And like, you're not going to win both of these cases on nullification, right? So it makes sense to do exactly what they did. And then why not? Why not try this? I mean, it could work. That's the thing. It's like the reason I don't think it's likely to work is like they'd have to carve out some kind of like difference from Manafort. And I don't think they want to necessarily do that. But, who knows? I mean, I don't know.
It seems like, and maybe this is part of the reason for all the flowery language and stuff, is that it's almost like it's a public campaign in a lot of ways too, right? Like you want to put the New York DAs on blast and be like, are you really going to do this? Like, are you really going to spend taxpayer money to continue prosecuting somebody and taking somebody to trial who's already pled guilty to those exact crimes? Like, it feels like it's partially a public relations shame campaign, right?
It is, but also, who are they making this argument to? The New York State courts, who are the architects of this distinction. So they're already inclined to say, we actually think it's bullshit how cases are like being pursued in federal and state court. So that's their audience, like, because this is going to end up, whatever happens, it's going to go to an appellate court. No matter who wins this, it's going up. And that's their audience, is a court in a state that has already said, we actually think the feds are doing too much generally.
Right. And when I was first reading it, my first thought was, I wonder if there is some inside information that they know that the appellate courts in New York are feeling some kind of way about this. And they're just waiting for a case where they can, say, actually, our statute means something. Actually, like, this is the language of the statute. You're totally right. Like, some of it is just this game of, because it's a high profile case, they can work multiple angles. And the guy's sitting in jail. He's not a danger to anybody. So, like, what difference does it make?
Well, they're not wrong in like the absurd spectacle that was made of him and the perp walk and all that stupid shit with the mayor, like, I think part of the point that they're trying to make is not just a legal one, but it is like, the reason that you guys even had this statute drafted in the first place is because you're kind of like sick of the bullshit, and look at how much bullshit there was here. Do I think it's likely to work? Probably not, just because they'd have to carve this out so specifically, but why not try?
Why not try? They make this representation in the motion that the feds are going, I guess this is part of their deal, that the feds are going to take the position at his sentencing that he's going to be sentenced as a first-degree murderer. So in other words, you don't need to worry that he's not going to be punished enough, because the feds are going to go for the full first-degree murder, which I guess, again, is supposed to make the state court feel better, like, well, somebody got him, so we're good.
Which is generally what the state court would do,
Yeah.
Because like, it looks like in here, like, guidelines is between 24 and 30 years ish. Yeah. But, like, I don't know how this works, but like, they have like upward departures and all that stuff they can do. And, do I think he'll end up getting more than that? Probably, but that's not my area of expertise. And I mean, look, how old is Luigi? 30?
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, he done.
He can be a hero in prison. Maybe he can do interviews with, I don't know. He can figure out how he wants to make his legacy or whatever. But it is a point well taken here that, like, if the concern by the state of New York, at least as a layperson or a non-criminal person, if the issue with the New York prosecutors is he's not been convicted of first-degree murder, when clearly this was first-degree murder, the point is well taken that he's going to be sentenced as if he committed first-degree murder. So, like, if you go ahead and prosecute him, what is the point? Is there also, I mean, I guess we have to see how the state of New York responds to this. They could respond and say, okay, fine, we'll drop it, right?
They could. I don't get the sense that they will because of how they proceed. Because, like, look, their behavior around him is ridiculous. Like their behavior, like what he did is like very, sensational, but like people do far worse things every day in the state of New York and you don't know about it.
It's true. It's true. There was something here. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. It's interesting because they talk a lot about double jeopardy, and then they say, but it's not really about double jeopardy because there is Supreme Court case law that says different sovereigns can charge people for the same conduct. It's really more of a like inherent due process question.
Yeah.
Like they say right here, like double jeopardy has been held not to violate Fifth Amendment due process because the states and the federal government are independent sovereigns, so they have their own right. But here, where two sovereigns forged an agreement between them to try a defendant twice for the identical that's the thing, like you said, that it's this conspiracy that they investigated it together. I mean, they go into all this detail about how when they found him in Altoona, Pennsylvania, the FBI was there and they coordinated with the New York State Police and the blah, 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 blah. Like,
but don't we want them to do that? Like,
right. I mean, they're two sovereigns, but they were kind of acting as one.
But yeah, like that makes sense given how this happens,
But like also, if you're the state court judge who has to rule on this, like it's not really a slippery slope, is it? Like this, it's not like this happens so often that you're worried you're going to create some kind of precedent and then a bunch of like murderers and terrorists are going to go free.
No, but like, whatever the lower, whatever I don't know if they're district court or whatever, this is going to go all the way up as far as it can go in New York State. I'm sure everybody who wins and loses is probably going to appeal.
Yeah.
But
just thinking about the public policy arguments, like if I'm the state of New York, I might want to make a public policy argument that this isn't just about Luigi, this is about the law in general, and this is about future cases. And unfortunately, to your point, unfortunately, we have a lot of crimes in New York and we have terrorism in New York. And this is going to kneecap the New York state justice system from being able to prosecute people. And it's like, I just don't know. We'll have to see, I guess, in their response. Is that something that really happens often enough that it actually matters?
yeah, I mean, I think the thing that too to keep in mind is like, one of these cases, federal versus state, could be weaker or stronger, facts depending, and the New York State Court may want to leave those options open for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah. Having never practiced criminal law, I'm just fascinated by like one of the things that I think is, I mean, there's a lot of differences, obviously, but the biggest difference to me is that anyone can bring a civil case. Anyone, any rando, any company, any person, any LLC, anybody can just be like, I'm going to roll up to court and file a complaint. And with criminal cases, because it's being brought on behalf of the government, there's all this thought that goes into it before it's even filed. And so I don't know. Well, yeah, that's true. But like there's a gatekeeper, supposedly, about who can file cases. And so whenever I'm looking at these things, I can't help but think about that decision-making process because I'm not used to it. With us, it's like, okay, you have this and this. Okay, that's good enough. We'll draft up a complaint. We'll give them $400 and you've got yourself a case. Has it become pretty typical for criminal defense attorneys in high profile cases or even not high profile cases to question the charging, like, why was this even charged this way? Or is that something that only happens in a big case like this where everybody's watching?
I mean, I'm not going to say it's uncommon. It's just that like the opportunity to make that argument super credibly isn't something that happens that much, like, yeah. I mean, actually, that's funny. I have a client that's this week where he was charged with a aggravated robbery, which is a robbery with a weapon. And basically what happened is that he had a weapon and he was talking about wanting something and the person just gave it to him but he wasn't trying to use the weapon to get the stuff, right? Like, do you get the distinction I'm making?
Mhm.
And so after
Had
he
the
got charged
weapon,
with
but he didn't use the weapon to, yeah.
he wasn't actually using it to take the stuff. He was like, it almost seemed like he was trying to buy, this is in a store, trying to buy the item while also just like kind of there was a lot going on here.
Okay.
And, you know, like after the case got indicted, I talked to the DA and I was like, yeah, I don't think you can actually prove the robbery. You can prove an aggravated assault, which is just like having a weapon and threatening somebody with it. And she agreed and it got reduced, you know? So it does happen, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you need a very particular set of circumstances.
Interesting. Okay, in that same vein, and last thing, do we have the exact same? No, yours is a Stanley and mine is a Brewmate. They're the same color. Look how
They
cute we are.
are.
All right,
Great minds.
we're adorbs. So back to Clancy for a second, because this came up in this preliminary conference, and I expect it will happen a lot in the charge conference. I hope we get to see the charge conference. It's my favorite. About Reddington saying that he would like there to be an instruction on involuntary manslaughter.
Yeah, let me pull the
Good idea,
language
bad
because
idea. I have that.
I think that it's a good idea to include lessers, because if they reject the insanity defense, you want to just give them an option. And also there's such a thing, and this is going to sound disgusting here, split the baby verdict, where everybody's like, we're not quite buying the mental health defense, but we also don't think she's the worst person in the world because we sort of understand some of this. And so
Yeah.
involuntary would probably be the one that fits that the most. But hang on, let me pull it up because I don't know the language.
I had it.
But yeah, because realistically, they're not going to be like, well, we're not rejecting in GRI, but we're considering, you know, like they're going to reject that defense and then go to the other things most likely. So wanton or reckless conduct. So, okay, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that defendant caused the death, intended the conduct that caused the death. The conduct was wanton or reckless. Yeah, the reason I don't think that actually works is that she wasn't unclear about wanting to cause the death. And so the conduct wasn't wanton or reckless. It was quite intentional. So if the judge denies that, I actually think that makes sense.
And there's like, how many are too many, right? Like how many, because again, in civil cases, it's a liability question. The thing I was thinking about the other day is one of the biggest differences about jury instructions and verdict forms and all that kind of stuff with civil cases and criminal cases is that in civil cases, you have the liability question, but you then have another question, and that question is the money.
Mhm.
Right? If there's liability, there's then another thing they have to go to of how much do you think this person deserves? Whereas
Which
in your
is
field, it's just in or out.
no, because in
Nope.
Texas, you go to a jury for punishment. You don't have that here. That's why Texas is the best, because you can go to a jury for punishment.
Like a whole new jury?
No. So if you elect, and it's defendant selection, if you elect to have the jury assess your punishment, then you go to trial on guilt innocence, and then there is a separate phase that it begins immediately after that with the same jury, where they then decide the punishment.
Oh, that's what happened with Athena, right? Tanner, whatever that guy's name was.
Well, yes, but the only question they were answering was death or penalty or not. Here, they get to consider the whole range of punishment. And I actually think it's a really great system.
So what are the benefits of that, do you think?
Jurors tend to be far more sympathetic than a judge would be. And people don't believe that in Texas, but that is 100% the case. Like I can't think of a situation that I've ever said, well, if we go to trial, you should go to the judge for punishment. Because a jury usually is willing to hear you out a little bit more. I mean, I had a murder case.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I tried a murder case a couple years ago where my client had already been to prison for murder. And he was very guilty of this murder. It wasn't really a question, but the victim was very not likable. And we presented all of that. And my client chose to testify, which whatever. I wasn't sure what to think of that, but that's what he wanted. And the jury, after even finding out, agreeing that he murdered someone and that finding out that he had been to prison for murder before, they were mad that they couldn't give him less time because he had an enhancement, because they thought that the DAs were dumb for trying the case and that nobody liked the victim. And even though we think you met your burden of proof on the elements, we weren't that mad at him. You think a judge is going to do that? Most of the time, no.
No.
Like, this was a older Black man on trial, and I had a bunch of jurors that were like white ladies from Highland Park, and they were crying for my client because they had to give him too much time because it was the minimum.
Goes back to this issue of our juries changing. I'm gonna.
The women that were the maddest were. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The women that were the maddest about having to give him the time were the people you would have least expected.
Really? I wonder if it's like an opening that they don't usually get in their life, or what. It feels like it doesn't cost them anything, right? Because this is a stranger, or maybe they feel altruistic about it. I don't know.
I think that because my client he was not doing well, he was living in a very not great apartment complex. This guy that he killed was a bully, and my client was like protecting the women from this guy. But like when he actually killed him, it was just like not legally justified. And I think it gave them a window into a life that they've never had to live. And they were surprised by how sympathetic they were to him.
Huh. Amazing how that happens, isn't it? All right. I'm going to go research juries changing, because I've never been on a jury. I never will be on a jury because obviously.
I have jury duty this week, in fact.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Good luck with that, Star. I'm sure that's going to go great, because I'm sure you know all the prosecution. So I don't think it is. Okay. This was good. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for us talking together. I'm going to go buy really expensive face cream is what I'm going to do, because.
Well, I'm telling you, I will be posting my video and whatever
at some point when you feel like it and get around to it, and then we'll see what happens. Go ahead.
Well, no, I need to do it soon, but yeah, I am very curious how this is going to go.
Well, we'll post it on our respective channels, and we'll see what the people say. Okay. And now,
do you want more people?
Do you want more? Do you want different? What do you want? What do you want? But I can say we are pioneers. We have just pioneered the 2 women lawyers YouTube episode, because I don't think it's ever been done before. So
if not, we did it better.
If not, yeah. And also, just need you guys to know we were trying to come up with a name for this, and we sort of didn't really land anywhere. We'll figure that out. But we decided hot attorney hose was just not appropriate for YouTube, but that's kind of how we feel. So
the truth isn't always appropriate, you can't handle the truth.
Sorry, guys.
To quote a famous law movie.